we get started. So I will just say hi, I'm Danielle. I'm the GM of Meltano. I would certainly encourage you to add questions to today's group conversation. Some teaser ideas for you. We just launched V1. We have had an interesting conversation in today's Meltano CEO Sync about how to scope down to the smallest possible units of work. I'm going to paste a graph into our notes, which kind of shows you where we're at with user growth. So you can see that we are working on that, but maybe also struggling a little bit. And these are all really great things for us to talk about. And it is 9 o'clock, so I am going to go ahead and get started. Well, to take advantage of this time, in case some questions pop in the next moment, I'll just tell you that we were at GitLab Commit in London, which is super fun. If you have not had a chance to come to one of our user conferences yet, it's a fairly new thing. I'm fairly new to GitLab. It's a fairly new thing for GitLab. And we were really fortunate. We got to do our V1 launch there. And Giannis from the Meltano team, who lives in Athens, Greece, was up on stage presenting what we do in a live demo. So if you go into the content that's been posted from Commit, you can see a presentation of Meltano using a bunch of GitLab data from Community Edition. So it's pretty cool because it shows you all sorts of interesting analytics and stats. And we have some other internal teams now at GitLab using that tap. So if you've been wanting to do any kind of analysis with your own project data, we can help you get started with that. It's kind of fun. And got some press coverage of Meltano. So that was really, really great trip for us. To add a little more context for those who are joining, I mentioned we had a great conversation today in our CEO Sync with Sid talking about how can we move even faster? How can we ship even more features that are going to drive adoption? And how can we do things that are scrappier? And maybe it's kind of the breadth versus depth approach, right? So Meltano is a very, very early project. So it's very tempting to make things perfect, to give them UIs, to make them feel like world-class product features. But in our case, a lot of stuff just needs to be, hey, edit a text file from the system, but in the UI, or hey, you can click this link and go do some manual process. And so leaving the door a lot more open for other contributions that are smaller. So if anyone has advice on how to navigate that, considering it's something GitLab also has to deal with, we would really benefit from that as well. So that's certainly something you could throw in the questions section. Well, looks like we may not have any questions. Cassiana, should I leave this going a little bit longer? Would you suggest that, or should we wrap?
I would keep it going at least a few more minutes.
No problem.
I can listen.
No, go ahead, Michael.
Thanks. I'll put this in the doc after I ask it. Sorry, I haven't written it down, but since it's been, I guess, probably a couple months since I saw the last group conversation for Meltano. So do you mind just giving those that are maybe newer here on the call or haven't been on one of these group conversations a 2 or 3 minute synopsis of some of the bigger accomplishments you think the team has kind of come to since you joined and the things you're most excited about?
Sure, thanks. And I appreciate getting a question so we have something to chat about. So I joined in late February, and at the time we had a product that primarily worked on the command line. So I think the big achievement for us is moving to having a UI-based product that works end to end. Our goal is to drive MAUI, which is monthly active users, in the UI. And I think it was very difficult at first for users to kind of make that jump from the command line to the UI. It was very tempting to just use the taps and targets and then move on. And we really want to own that process all the way through because we want to help the user get to a result where we can say, okay, Meltano gave me this insight, or Meltano helped me create a repeatable process. So at first, we were just like an easier way to use singers, taps, and targets. So I think we've come a long way in terms of just our documentation and the process. We do something called speedruns, which you can watch on the Meltano YouTube channel, and you can see how much faster it has gotten to go from nothing to a working dashboard. So I think the speedruns now, the fastest one is 1 minute 35 seconds, I think is the record right now. We're a little competitive about that, which is fun. But just kind of prioritizing the user experience and making it a little bit lower barrier to entry is probably the #1 achievement. We've also integrated Airflow, which is huge. I think in a way we're really early with the orchestration features because we have so much else to do to make Meltano valuable. It's not super clear to me that most users want to orchestrate, but then one funny thing that's happened is people say, you know, just having you guys take care of Airflow as a bundled installation is really helpful because Airflow can be really difficult to configure, can have issues if you're not super technical. Some of the things that come up, you can't really handle them gracefully. So I think it was one of those funny ones where it felt a little bit early, but we ended up just iframing in Airflow's user interface, which is actually a great example of, it's like, what's the absolute minimum thing that you can do? Other achievements, just getting user growth happening. I mean, we'd like to have more users, but I think now we do have engagement. We have people coming into our Slack channel. We have one of our contributors, George, who's going to be flying out to Denver for our first like Meltano, calling it Meltano Assemble. It's our own little, you know, team conference, kind of like contribute. So having that community and people who care every day about the fact that Meltano exists besides our team, I think those are all things to be super proud of.
That's awesome. That's great.
I guess I would also add the team staying together. I think the project was at an interesting place when I joined. It had been worked on for a while, primarily as an internal tool. And I think it was a little unclear, at least to me, kind of what was going to be the driver to keep us all together and keep us motivated. And I think by shipping every week and just like getting more done and working on building relationships, like the team stayed together. So it's pretty awesome. And I feel like I mean, hopefully I'm not speaking, you know, and Mikhail's going to be like, actually, Danielle, but I think we have a pretty good time together working on this. So I'm proud of that too.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, especially the different sides of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to pop back to the questions here. Justin, do you want to verbalize your question? Oh, this is the same one?
Well, I asked it while you were answering, and I think Mech just added some insights, but I could vocalize it if you'd like.
Well, I think it's a little different from what I addressed there. So yeah, please do.
Yeah, so, you know, I think one question that I have is, you know, there's lots of things that you mentioned. There's lots of things that you guys could be working on, and there's a breadth versus depth question. I know that we have stopped using Meltano internally in order to kind of expedite some of the things that we're working on. And so maybe with that as a little bit of a shade of color to this, and I don't mean shade in the other sense, what sort of specific strategies are we doing to, using to add users, right? So to get people sort of committed to the community, and where is this like not progressing where we would hope it to, or where are we maybe a little bit confused by a lack of adoption? And then happy to clarify anything if you have a follow-up question to there.
Yeah, that's great. Let's start there and then we can see kind of where that goes. So as far as strategies for building a community, we've been pretty focused on, hey, here's the product features we've built, come use Meltano to solve problem X. And I think that has been good because we have gotten, iterative feedback every week in terms of what do you have, what do you not have that's causing me to adopt Meltano. I think maybe where we could have done better and where we need to do better now is making sure we're talking to the right people. I think if you're a data analyst or data engineer in a really big company, Meltano is going to be somewhat disappointing for you. It just doesn't have the feature richness. But that doesn't mean there aren't people out there who are totally capable of getting value out of Meltano. So we need to kind of meet our users more where they are. And I think that's going to be a lot more kind of in forums, in the places where early adopters hang out. Our Slack channel, we probably could just do more to engage with the people who are already in there. They're pretty technical and there are a lot of people who are contributing. So I think in a way we've been, I don't know if I should say we or I think I have wanted to find people with cool data sets to tell interesting stories about using Meltano. And a lot of times that's like more established business people, but the reality is the people who can really adopt an early stage product like this are potentially more like the hacker who's building it. And maybe they, having the cool story or the business data set isn't their focus. So I think that's where we could do better. I think we could also just tell more smaller stories. So I think waiting for like the big, awesome brand name win is probably a very slow way to go. So we probably have a lot of like small wins in our community we could be blogging about. So I think maybe just more shots on goal in terms of storytelling is something that we could do better. So we already blog 3 or 4 times a week. We blog our releases, our speed runs, other cool things that come up. But we recently added a marketer to the team, and I think that's going to be really helpful for us. Just partly that person's mentality is to spot opportunities to talk about our story. And so having that person constantly saying, this is a story, this is a story, this Slack conversation is a story, and just pushing more of that out there is a big part of our going forward strategy. We've also not done much in terms of traditional marketing. So we've sent one email to our community, and that was for our V1 launch. And we're running some ads campaigns experimentally, but they're very, very small and not super optimized. So those are all greenfield opportunities for us too. I feel like there was a second piece of your question. Oh, it was just about where are we not progressing? Well, we would definitely like to be hitting our numbers in terms of the graph that's above. And I think Sid has a great metaphor. Like a word, I'm going to butcher it because I just learned it. But we're talking today about, it looks like it's a small gap to make up. It's like going from 156 to 500. You think about how many users GitLab has, it feels like, well, those are just tiny numbers. But it's a really good point. Like that's already, you're missing 80%. And so as the goal continues to go up, it just gets harder and harder. And it's kind of like payday loans territory. Like you never get caught up, or it's just extremely difficult to get caught up. I think for a while, the mentality that I was bringing was we need to get the product to a point where we can even talk about it and have productive conversations. And maybe with some hope that just in doing that alone, that would make up the gap. And while I do think that's important, obviously it's not enough. So that's definitely an important thing. Is it would be much easier to go really hard at closing the gap now, while the numbers are relatively small. We could do some more aggressive things today to make up the difference, and that will ease the pain later, as opposed to trying to solve that problem 6 months down the road. So I don't really totally understand this last piece, which maybe you can explain, but it's like GitLab's a tough lender. I mean, I think anyone who's financing innovation, whether in time or money, is a tough lender in the sense that like we know there are things we can build that grow fast. We have examples of that in the world, and it's almost like if there was two simulations, there's the Meltano situation we're in today and some other Meltano simulation. In some simulation of Meltano, we are hitting these numbers. So it's really just what is different between the world today and that world. Like what is the gap to bridge in actions or activities or choices? Because in some world, this project is actually exactly where it needs to be. So we need to kind of jump the track is the way I think about it. Like what are the 5 ways we can change the narrative? I don't know, Sid, if you want to add more to your metaphor on this.
Sure. Yeah. Well, the tough lender is like in a startup, you need to grow 10% week over week, which is just ridiculous. Like if that was a loan, it would be banned immediately. It's 14,000% a year or something. But that's what you need to do in a startup, and it's super hard. And for us, it was the accountability came during Y Combinator, where we were like, oh, we have a great 3-month plan and we're going to build all these great features. And then we came in 2 weeks later and we haven't moved the needle. And it was like, they didn't say it, like, what are you doing? But it kind of was like that. Like all the other people were doing stuff in 2 weeks. And we're like, the first reaction is like, it's impossible. We cannot do these things in 2 weeks. And then we went back and we drove back and well, there's no other option. We'll have to. And we got back to the house and we said, okay, we have a 3-month plan, but what can we ship in the next 2 weeks? And everyone's, it's impossible. And we were able to talk about it. And we just scoped down features. Like instead of making, what we talked about today, instead of making something editable, just show the file and maybe show a link how to open it in your editor, or a button how to open it in your editor. Instead of just do way less work. And it was so bad that people, one person said back in the Netherlands, he was like, what has gotten into you? You all are crazy. Like we're shipping stuff that's like so half baked, but we're like, well, we're getting 80% of the benefit with 20% of the work. And what we need to show results in 2 weeks. And so that's like, it's super painful, but that's iteration. And especially in the beginning, you need to do that because you need to kind of get it to a state where there's product market fit. And then you can invest in longer term things. But until you know that, it's a super expensive loan. And you need to get out of that payday territory as soon as possible.
Yep. Thank you, Sid. Mike, your question, you said you already asked it. Yes, thank you. Anna, would you like to verbalize your question?
Sure. So my question is, do we have any support to add on more data sources to Meltano, like SQL Server, Oracle database?
Yes, so databases in general, these two and many others are definitely being talked about. Right now, I think one of the struggles for us is adding databases is a pretty big investment. So that's something we have to figure out, but it's definitely on the roadmap at some point in the future.
Okay, good to know. Thanks.
No problem. Awesome. Well, Justin, Mike, Anna, I really appreciate your questions. I'm going to leave just one more minute here if anyone wants to ask anything. Otherwise, we're going to wrap it up.
So just trying to learn here, what's the difference between the Confluent and Meltano? Confluent is an event streaming data analytics, as far as I know, but do you have any more insight on it?
Do I have insight? I mean, I think right now the biggest thing I would say is different is it's more focused on event streaming. So we're more focused on an end-to-end platform. So Meltano is not really focused on real-time analytics or real-time, event-based actions. So what's really cool about Confluent is you could build a business automation process for your company based on top of that. Arguably, at some point, you could do something similar with Meltano. You could have Airflow running orchestration on an ongoing basis, and you could create similar outcomes to some extent, but then architecturally, there's different things you would ultimately want to do. So, I mean, Confluent is using Apache Kafka and other Apache tools. So it's kind of like, if Meltano is really successful, people are going to be asking us, why don't we do these things? But it's probably more like in our end game and not so much in the current world today. People could hack Meltano to do some similar things, without having to spend the same amount of money if they wanted to.
Got it. Thanks for the insight.
Yeah, no problem. Cool. Well, if there are any other questions, please add them, but I'll just plug for Meltano really quickly for all of you who are listening. We do have a one-click app in the DigitalOcean marketplace. So even if you're listening and you don't know how to set up these kinds of tools, you don't have to. You can go and play with Meltano. It connects to GitLab's APIs, both for Ultimate and for kind of community level. So whether you're using it for a GitLab internal project or some other cool project, or somebody out there who might have problems that we can solve, it's really easy to adopt now, and that's one of the things we're really proud of. So we'd love to have you as a user. You're welcome always to jump into the Meltano Slack channel, ask questions, and we can help you get started. We have a couple internal teams using it, and we're hoping to write blog posts about it. And so if this is exciting to you, if you have interesting data, you've been looking at ways to crunch, we would love to have you as a customer. All right. Thank you, everyone.